So Michael, let's have a chat today
Sure.
about your recent trip to Perth.
Yep.
You conducted an event, or were a speaker at the event of the Prominent Agents Network, the PAN event.
Yep.
Apparently went for a long time. How many hours was the presentation?
Look, overall nearly 7, I think.
Wow, it's a huge
So we
day.
started a bit after 9 and we finished around 4, give or take. So what's that? Yeah, and we had a break in between. So it was good. Yeah, I was actually fortunate because I had a really good crowd.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know the crowd were really involved in this presentation, asking you lots of questions at the end. So I thought it'd be great to get some of those questions out on our YouTube channel and see if we can add a little bit more insight there post-event.
Yeah, happy to do it.
I've got a few questions here. I'm just going to run through a few that were asked at the event.
Don't ask me hard ones.
No hard ones? Okay. Just the easy ones today.
Easy
Let's go
questions
easy
for
on
me
you.
today, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to flick through now and have a look. Okay, you speak a lot about crisis management. In our recent videos, we've done quite a few that relate to crisis management. And one of the questions that was asked in relation to crisis management is, how do you implement the concept? So I think what they're trying to ask there is to go into a little bit more detail on when you do come across a particular crisis in your business or personal life, how does that management of the crisis take shape?
I think it's hard to be really analytical with it, but I think you need a base. So at work, as I've stated previously, if a problem rates 8 on a Richter scale of 10, it's got to have immediate attention. So therefore, what I try and do is I try and rate everything that we do, especially in a business sense, to see sort of what attention it needs. So therefore, because in business, what actually happens is that most people are reactionary late. And when you get a problem, you're generally reactionary anyway. But I think having a sense of urgency around a problem is the key to getting it resolved quickly. Because again, as we mentioned this morning, problems are like baggage. Or garbage, the longer you leave it, the heavier it gets.
So getting on top of it early
Yes.
is part of that crisis.
Yeah, so therefore if it rates 8, then we've got to look at it straight away. Otherwise it can wait for a staff meeting or a general meeting, and we can assess it and look at it then discuss a process moving forward, because the business has got to run day to day. But crisis management it gives you a structure to handle something straight away, but B, because I love the whiteboard, and I can remember in my early days in real estate, my first two real estate principals taught me this art, and I don't know if they really knew what they were teaching me at the time, but if we'd lose a market appraisal or evaluation to another agent, or we were going to lose one, etc., we would tackle it on the spot and get on the whiteboard and have a look and see whether we went through the process properly, whether we gave the vendor all the right information, whether we acted accordingly, were we tired or not, did we have a big night the night before, are we operating on good scripts and dialogues, are we convincing, are we pure in our thought process, those sorts of things. So therefore, and in a lot of cases, we were able to retrieve potentially lost business before we actually lost it. Yeah. Right? That's great crisis management, because you're actually tackling something and saving something from being an attrition. You actually make it a gain.
Yeah, identifying it early and being able to do that is part of the process. But
Absolutely.
What I noticed is a constant theme with you as well is taking personal accountability, individual accountability for when things do go wrong. So putting it on the whiteboard and looking at what did we do wrong, what could we do better, rather than pointing the finger anywhere else. So part of managing that crisis is taking accountability.
Well, I believe in that adage, when you teach, you learn. So therefore, every time there's a problem, I hopefully gain more knowledge. So that will actually make me better at my art as well. Yeah. So therefore, when someone comes to me with an issue, the reality of that is that I should be able to walk away being better in business than what I was beforehand.
Always learning.
Yes. So, but also when you teach, you learn. But when you handle a problem and you have a look at its fallout, and there is always a derived benefit out of tackling something early. Yeah. Even if you can't get the business, the fact that you look at it, you associate a sense of loss with it, and then you associate a sense of expediency in relation to getting it resolved. And even though you might lose a client, the fact that you might be able to go back to the client and say, look, I'm sorry I didn't do a good enough job for you, etc., you might find that you innately you become better the next time you go and deal with a client. Because our business, the real estate and developing business, and most businesses are very socially orientated businesses. So it's a very, doing business with someone is quite an intimate thing. So I think it's very important that with our crisis management that we tackle things A, that rate 8 out of 10 straight away, and B, that we actually get a learning from it, whether we are able to retrieve the business or not. And we should have a learning to make us better the next time, because there's no point tackling a problem if we're not learning and being better operators the next time we go to do it.
Yep, that's great. Well, another question that came up from the presentation, which I quite like, is got to do with knowing if something's right for you. And this audience member asked, how did you know that real estate was right for you, or did you know it was right for you when you first started?
Yeah, I had a really long-winded answer to that question. The reality of it is, when I first got into real estate, I actually didn't like it. And because real estate agents had always been seen as shifty and, and I got into it sort of a bit begrudgingly at the time. But the thing that attracted me with real estate was this, is that if you service the public, you were well remunerated for it. Yes. And I already came from a job previously that I was fairly well remunerated, but I thought, gee, the remuneration is 5x here for the same amount of time. Yeah. So I thought, geez, if I've got to service the public, I think I can do that okay. So then what I learned that once I got better at my art and I knew more about real estate than the next guy, because part of the journey of me enjoying real estate was the fact I was learning. So because I was always learning and real estate was always forever changing, the median house price was changing, the amount of properties coming on the market were changing, and things were always changing. It was actually invigorating me. So when did I know? I sort of knew reasonably early, and I knew purely by the fact that I thought if I can service someone better than the next agent, I'll generally win the business. And then I need to know more than the next agent. So I went on a bit of a learning curve, and it was the learning and the consistent education of real estate that kept me in the business and loving it more. In short, yeah.
That's great. Thanks for the answer. Now, another question that came from the presentation was in relation to prospecting, and I think you've mentioned this a few times before, how it's probably not necessarily the most enjoyable part of the job for real estate agents. It's something that some approach with some amount of hesitation.
Or disdain.
Or disdain even. Obviously, it's a difficult thing to pick up the phone and be proactive. Yeah. I guess the question here is asking, how much prospecting do successful agents need to do?
The agents that I know that are doing exceptionally well, there's a mix. There's those that have a prospecting arm or a linkage of people that prospect for them on an ongoing basis. But I find that the ones that are successful in that area have already got a good name in the marketplace. So therefore, the people that are prospecting for them are prospecting on a basis that the guy they're prospecting for or the girl they're prospecting for is already well known. So that makes it a little bit different, right? Mm-hmm. But I believe that the real game of real estate is this. If you believe that leaving every person you meet as important, and if you believe that every time you have a business interaction that you want to leave those people better off for having dealt with you, those two things generally make up the core of great salespeople.
So if you approach prospecting with that mentality, it's a more positive angle on having to go out and talk to people that they're going to benefit from the interaction you're providing them.
Yeah, and it's always a case of giving information.
Yes.
The one thing with real estate, everyone loves to talk about real estate, no different to the crypto discussion at the moment. It's becoming out in the market, and you watch, crypto is going to be like real estate soon. Everyone's going to be, at the barbecues, they're going to be talking about real estate or cryptos. They'll be the 2 points of discussion, right? Where it used to be real estate and football. Yeah. Right? Now I think it's going to be real estate and cryptos. Yeah. So the reality of that is that when people get educated, you get their attention. And when they're learning from you, you get their attention. So it's better to prospect or network when you're giving information to people. And that's really what makes a great real estate salesperson, generally speaking, when they're seen to be the expert.
Great answer, thanks for that. I've got another great question that came from the presentation. What is your main, or what was your main driver of success? And what did you have to sacrifice along the way?
When I got into real estate, aside from the fact of I thought that we were well remunerated, it was an area where I could just keep pushing myself. So therefore, if I had a particularly good year one year, then I'd try and better it the next year. So therefore, I'd always reassess my goals and give myself higher targets to do. And Dr. Fred calls them stretch goals. Yes. Like I end up increasing my goal target each year, not just financially, but with other things as well. So that was one of them. And I think I like the endeavour, the striving got me, because it's so competitive that kept me in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a sport. It's just a competitive nature.
Yeah, it's really competitive. And I love that. And, I love the fact that, the opposition would be interested in seeing on what we were doing. It was good to go in and know that, I'd gone in against 4 or 5 other people and got the listing. And then the next game would be to make sure that I'd have to get the vendor to understand the benefits of marketing, and then make sure the marketing department did a really good job presenting the property. Then I'd have to be on there selling it, all those sorts of things. So the endeavour and the striving was the thing that always kept me in play. And it was interesting because I never really had a goal target until I was quite a few years in, right? I started having financial targets after I became fairly successful. But initially I was working purely because I just loved it.
Yeah. So you didn't notice the financial side of it?
No, until one day my wife comes to me and says, listen, you didn't realise how much you earned last month. And I went, what, how much? She goes, blah. And I went, really?
Yeah.
She goes, yeah. I went, I think I might stick at this game for a little while. Right, so from that point of view, and then I ended up buying a business and doing all that sort of stuff, and the rest is history. But it's the striving and the endeavour, and I love the competition. Competition just made me feel great. I loved it. Even when I was losing, the assessment of my loss and looking at that crisis management type thing, that was just great. And then my 2 original real estate principles taught me that really well. When we had a loss of some description, we would assess on what we did wrong. But that was also part of the striving, because the next time I'd be implementing new procedures. So that was good. So my business acumen was growing, but my ability to educate myself was growing too, which was great.
And on to the second part of the question then. What did you have to sacrifice in order to achieve that level of success?
Sacrifice is a perception. So, I look at it and I say, I don't think I really sacrificed much or anything. What do I sacrifice? I sacrificed maybe some social time, but I didn't see it as a sacrifice because we were on a journey.
And you were enjoying it by the sound of it.
And we were loving it. Karen and I both had good jobs, all that sort of thing. So, and we were building a future. So therefore, on a Saturday night, we'd be at home, and from initially trying to conserve and save some money, but because I'd start work at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, and I was the only agent at the time working on Sundays in the area, I'd go to bed not too late, so I was still fairly fresh. I didn't see that as a sacrifice. I saw that as the journey. So sacrifice is a perception on that score, and then by the time as we had the 2 boys, the reality of it is, I probably sacrificed some time with my oldest one when he was growing up, on the basis that I had a business that was flourishing and we were busy. So therefore, you can look at it in that light. But I think now I've got the benefit of spending most days with him and all that now. So I couldn't have had one without the other. So I don't see that as a sacrifice. My belief is that I made the decisions at the time that were beneficial. I don't see them as sacrifices as such.
Yeah, and I think one of your sayings that leads me to this is that anything of value has a price. So if you're working towards something, it's going to come at a certain cost of your time or whatever it might be, but you don't necessarily see that as a sacrifice.
Well, because the benefits later on are now that my oldest son's 23, and as you know, he was in here with us working today for a few hours. No problem. It was lovely to have him come in. Yep. We had a coffee together, we had a drink, etc., etc. Those sort of things. My early days in real estate work have actually brought me to this point today where he's got the availability to do that with us and also educate us on cryptos.
Yeah.
So, like all that sort of stuff. So he's had the facility of time because of all the stuff that Karen and I did 25 years ago.
Yes. So
that's how I see that. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The next question is about prioritising. And you often talk about having a calendar and having planning your day in advance. And this question is about how you prioritize what you need to do first. So I wonder if you can elaborate on that a little bit for us.
Okay. How do I assess that? All right. I think diary planning, I'll start from the basics. I think diary planning is important. I like to write things down. So when I write them down, I tend to remember them. So what I do is at the end of every day, I start tomorrow's what I call shit list.
Yes.
Right? So I have a look at the things that I haven't done in my diary and I forward them on to the next day. Now, everyone's probably heard that line 1,000 times. What I tend to do though is in the mornings when I re-look at the list may look very different to the night before by the time I look at it again the next morning. So I have a look at it and I try and get my harder jobs done first thing in the morning. So that's my priority generally is the things I like doing the least I do first. So that's the first thing. The second thing is if it's a dollar orientated job where when I was in real estate it might have been a market appraisal or a listing opportunity or a selling opportunity, right, I would generally try and confine those to the afternoon. Because I like doing those sort of things, I was making my most pleasurable jobs later in the day. So by the time I went home, I was generally in a really good mood anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So and that's how I did that. So I generally prioritise my my dollar orientated behaviour in the afternoons and more of my admin and those things that I didn't like in the mornings. And that's how I sort of distinguish my priorities.